It was a regular afternoon when an unemployed father, struggling to make ends meet, heard a desperate cry for help. Without hesitation, he ran to the source of the sound. Finding a young girl who had fallen from a tree, her injuries severe. With quick thinking and a heart full of compassion, he rushed to her aid, not knowing that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. What he didn't realize was that the girl he saved wasn't just any child. Her mother was a reclusive millionaire, one of the wealthiest women in the country. As the story unfolds, will this act of heroism lead to a life of unexpected riches? Or will the truth unravel in ways he never imagined? As the father carried the girl to safety, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her injuries weren't severe enough to explain the panic in her eyes. He tried to calm her down, asking her name, but she wouldn't speak. Just before he called for an ambulance, a sleek black car pulled up, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. The woman who stepped out was elegant, her expression unreadable, but her gaze fixed on the girl with a mix of relief and worry. It wasn't until she handed the father a large sum of money that he realized there was more to this than a simple rescue. Who was this woman, and what did she want from him? The money felt cold in the father's hand, heavy with uncertainty. He had never seen so much cash in his life, and something about the way the woman looked at him made him uneasy. It wasn't gratitude, not exactly. More like an unspoken expectation. She thanked him briefly before turning her attention to the girl, who now seemed to recognize her. But there was no hug, no rush of affection. Instead, the woman gently examined the child's arm, inspecting the bruises as if they were a minor inconvenience. The father watched, torn between disbelief and confusion. Why hadn't the girl spoken a word? Who was this woman, and why was she acting so detached? Days passed, and the father couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. He needed answers, but every time he tried to find out who the woman was, people went strangely quiet. Whispers filled the streets of his neighborhood, but no one would speak directly. Then one evening, a letter arrived. The envelope was heavy, sealed with an unfamiliar emblem. Inside was a single sentence. Asterisk, you saved more than you know. Asterisk, no return address, no explanation. The mystery deepened. Why was he being watched? Why was this wealthy woman so intent on keeping her identity hidden? And most unsettling of all, what had happened to the girl that made her so terrified to speak? With more questions than answers, the father's life was slowly unraveling. And he realized the deeper he dug, the more dangerous things became. The letter lingered in the father's mind, its cryptic message gnawing at him. Days turned into weeks, and the uneasy feeling in his gut only grew. Everywhere he went, eyes seemed to follow him. People avoided making eye contact, as if they knew something he didn't. Then late one night, he received a call, unknown number. His pulse quickened as he answered. "Meet me at the old pier, alone," a voice instructed, cold and deliberate. "You've come too far to back out now." The father didn't. The air hung heavy with tension, and the father stood frozen, unable to process the shift in everything he thought he knew. What had happened to this girl? What secrets were finally about to be revealed? The father's heart raced as the girl stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. The men in suits hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her sudden appearance. For a moment, everything was still, silent except for the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. The father barely recognized her. She wasn't the same fragile child who had fallen from the tree. There was a coldness in her eyes now, a quiet power he couldn't understand. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaky. "What's going on?" The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at the woman, her mother, who stood motionless, watching the unfolding scene with a distant expression. Then, as if making a decision, The girl spoke, her voice steady and commanding. Everything you think you know is a lie. The fall, me, none of it was by accident. My mother didn't send you to the hospital because she was grateful. She sent you to keep you in the dark. She never meant for you to get this far. The words hit him like a blow, and for a second, he felt the ground beneath him shift. What was she saying? How could he have been so blind? I was never just some random child, she continued, her eyes narrowing. I'm the key to something much bigger than you or me. The father stared at her, confusion and disbelief flooding his mind. This couldn't be happening. She was just a girl, right? But her presence felt far more dangerous now. She wasn't the victim he thought she was. She was something else entirely. The woman stepped forward then, her posture almost regal, as if she was used to controlling every situation. You should have stayed away, she said, her voice soft but laced with a sharp edge. But now that you're here, we have no choice. Before the father could react, one of the men in suits stepped toward him, his hand reaching for his arm with a firm grip. The father recoiled, but the man's eyes were cold, calculating. A heavy silence hung in the air. The father looked around at the men in suits, the woman standing motionless, the fog swirling around them. Every part of him screamed to turn and run, to forget the whole thing, but something about the girl's words gripped him. He thought about his family, his daughter, his struggling life, and a cold realization washed over him. He was already in too deep. What happens if I don't choose? He asked, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. The girl's eyes flickered, her hand dropping from his arm. She looked up at her mother one last time before meeting his gaze. You'll regret it, she said simply, but you'll never know what we could have done. The father took a deep breath. Then I'll stay. There was a pause, a beat of silence before everything seemed to fall into place. The men in suits nodded, and one of them handed the father a briefcase, the weight of it familiar and ominous. He opened it slowly, revealing stacks of documents, each one stamped with symbols and names he didn't recognize. And then, at the top, was a name that made his heart stop. His own name. The woman turned, a final, calculated smile crossing her lips. Welcome to the real world. There's no going back now. The fog seemed to close in around him, but the father wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had come crashing down, but there was something else lingering. As he reached out for the documents, the final twist hit him hard. There, hidden beneath the layers of paperwork, was a single photograph, a photograph of himself. But it wasn't a recent picture. It was an old one from years ago when he had been a different man, an entirely different person. The person he was now had never existed. The girl, the woman, the men, they all knew him. And he didn't even know who he was anymore. The realization hit him like a flood. He wasn't just a pawn in their game. He was the key to their plan. And now he would have to decide what he was willing to sacrifice to keep the pieces from falling apart. The world he thought he knew had just shattered. The father stared at the photograph, the weight of his past crashing into him. He wasn't just a man struggling to get by. He was part of something much bigger, something he could never have imagined. The girl wasn't a stranger. She was his daughter. The mother, the woman behind everything, wasn't just some wealthy recluse. She was the head of a powerful organization. And he had been a key figure all along, erased from his own memory. As the fog cleared, the truth finally settled in. He had a choice: to continue living in the shadows of his past, or to step into a world where nothing was as it seemed. Whatever he decided, there was no turning back. And so the father walked away, his future uncertain, but his resolve stronger than ever. The pieces were in place, but the story was just beginning.